Thanks, Marcus. I'll just turn my video on now. Good morning, everyone. So I'm just going to share my screen. As Marcus mentioned, what I'm going to cover is, let me just hide some of the Zoom UI. What I'm going to cover are some best practices for transitioning your students and courses between academic years. So as the poll suggested, a lot of you have been using it for LT for sort of 1 or 2 years. And one of the things you'll need to be thinking about around this time is clearing out courses and removing student access for those students that have been using LT but are no longer going to be continuing to do so. What I'm going to do is cover some best practices now. As with a lot of things in LT, there are many different ways to approach this. So what I'm going to be giving you is kind of my opinion on how I think things are best done to avoid kind of pitfalls and things like that. But I will touch on some other methods for kind of managing courses and students between years a little bit later on. So yeah, feel free to put questions in the Q&A, or you can type them in the chat and I'll try and address them at the end. I don't think I'll take the entire half hour, hopefully. So the first thing that I'll mention regarding course management is, generally speaking, and this is perhaps a more preventative thing, maybe something you'll do for next year, I normally recommend that you set up your LT courses in such a way that you only have a single year's cohort in a given course. The reason being is that it's pretty easy to have multiple LT courses. We've got course grouping now, so it doesn't matter if you have a lot of courses, because you can kind of hide the ones you don't want to see by collapsing the grouping. And generally speaking, it's a bit more difficult to manage student access in a course where there are multiple years. Even if you follow the best practices, there are still a lot of pitfalls that you can come across that might make your life a little more difficult than they need to be. So I've got my LT course set up here on the left-hand side. So this is my Physiology 2020 to 2021 course. This is a really easy way of just identifying what cohort is in this given course. Like, just stick the academic year that they're part of into that course, and you can quickly identify which cohort they're in, whether they're upcoming students that are joining the university this coming September, October time, or whether they're the outgoing year ones. You can easily kind of split them down this way. As I said, it's much easier to have them split into the different cohorts as opposed to having multiple cohorts and multiple different degree programs all in the same LT course. It can make kind of clearing access and managing access quite difficult. So regardless of whether these year one students are being removed from LT entirely or whether you still want them to have access, what I normally recommend is to archive or delete the course at the end of the academic year. But before we do that, we're going to, if we're going to be running it the next year, we're going to duplicate the course. Now, the reason we do this is that it clears out the course from your course view on the left-hand side here, but you can still have the students retain access if you like, and you can still duplicate the course before we do that in order to keep all of the same content. So the really straightforward process for this is, if we're going to be running the same course next year with the same content, we're going to just duplicate the course. So to do this, we scroll down, go to settings, and we click the gear menu. The gear menu tends to give you lots of ancillary options, typically to do with copying, pasting, importing, exporting, the context depending on exactly what menu you're in. So if I click on this, I get a few options, and the first of which is to copy the course. So we're going to click on this, and what this will do is essentially create a fresh version of the course. It'll have all the same content, but there'll be no students and none of the content will be published. So it's going to be really easy for me to run this same course next year by creating a copy. It's going to be completely fresh. I can then invite the incoming year ones to this separate course. Again, we can already point out where there might be an issue if we try and bring them into this course. If I invite my year one students first, my incoming year one students, before I start clearing out my outgoing ones, and that's the way I want to do it. If I accidentally import them in and I've not assigned them to a section, I'm suddenly going to have a mixture of year one and year two students in my course. I'm not going to know which is which. I'm going to have to manually go through and pick out the ones that I need to remove the access for. So by duplicating the course and inviting my students to this new copy of the course, I'm eliminating that issue. And it gives it the same name with copy, but we can again scroll down to the settings menu, and in here I can rename the course, something that makes sense. And again, where possible, try and standardize your course names as well. This just makes it easier for you to pass that information when you look back at the course down the line. So there we go. I've now got my new copy of this course. Worth noting, there is a minor con to doing this, and that is that none of the content is published. If you look back at my original, I've obviously got some published modules that my students have been working on this year. In a copied course, none of the content is published, but it is all there. And of course, there are no student accounts in here at all. It's fresh, it's ready to invite the incoming year ones. So that's the way that I always think about doing it. It makes it nice and simple to kind of turn over a course, simply duplicate it, and we're now free to delete or archive this original course. Now, it's worth noting that there are very few permanent deletes in LT. I think there's one, which is when you make a student restart a lesson for whatever reason. But deleting a course is not permanent. It can be restored at any time, so don't worry if you accidentally delete a course and you realize, oh, actually, I need to go in and export the grades. You can just restore it back, do that, and then re-delete it again. So it's not permanently lost. So if we go back to our original course, we can go back into the settings and go back to that gear menu. And in here, there are then two other options below copy course that we're going to utilize now. We can archive the course, or we can delete the course. There's some pretty big differences here. When you archive the course, it moves to this little archive tab here. So again, it kind of disappears from your general view, keeping the course, if it's not a course that's actively running, why do you need to see it in your day-to-day view? But an archive course can still be accessed by the students that are on it, but they are in read-only mode. They'll no longer be able to start new content, edit any content. Even if they haven't committed it, they still won't be able to make any changes. And it is worth noting that if students only exist on archived courses, i.e. they're not on any active courses, they do not count towards your seat limit. So you'll see that reflected in your usage numbers when you clear out students. Even if it's archiving, they won't count towards your limit. So it's quite a nice way of even if students are no longer using LT, to allow them to retain some modicum of access to the previous content for revision purposes. So archiving is pretty nice. That's probably the preference, I would say. But you do have the option as well of deleting the course. Deleting the course will make it completely inaccessible to any students that are on it. It will disappear from their kind of homepage, their menu here on the left. They won't be able to access it or view any of the content that was in there, whether to make any changes or even to look at it. They will no longer see the course at all on the left-hand side. And doing so, effectively deleting the course will also delete those students. But again, deleting students, it doesn't matter, you can restore them anytime. So again, you don't need to worry too much about accidentally deleting courses or anything along those lines. So I'm going to go ahead and archive my course. And it'll now disappear from my view here. But I can click on the little archive button at the bottom left, and you can see my course is still there. I can even go in and do things here as an admin. If I wanted to go in and export the grades, for example, I can actually still go in and do that without needing to restore the course. So a lot of the functionality is actually retained when you archive. And again, you could restore the course if you needed them to have writing access again. Just be cautious with your student numbers. If those students have been cleared out and you've got a new cohort coming in occupying your LT seats, those students that are restored will take up more seats and will give you a call and wonder why their numbers have suddenly doubled over your limit. So yeah, archiving is a really nice way to kind of turn over your courses. I'm now free to go in here and start publishing or scheduling the release time of my content, and I'm ready to go ahead and invite my next cohort of students once I've got some content released. That's the easiest workflow because it's in my mind, it's very straightforward. You need to do this obviously to each course that you want to kind of turn over, but the fact that you're simply just duplicating the course and then going back and archiving or deleting the original is only a few steps. There's no mixing of multiple cohorts of students in your course, you're suddenly having to go and remove them. And even if you do, as I mentioned, even if you do follow the correct workflows for that, there are some pitfalls which I kind of will point out now, because as I said, there are several other ways of managing your courses. This is just the way I feel is the best way to kind of re-prepare LT for the next academic year. You've cleared out those courses that are no longer actively running. They might be archived for read-only access, or they might be deleted. Either way, they're not showing you left-hand view, and you've got a bunch of, you've got 50 courses of which only 10 are active. Suddenly you've got to scroll through everything to try and find the right course. So archiving or deleting is by far the best method. And if you do that to the original course, or that effectively clears out the students' access as well, so you don't have to go through and manually clear those students either. It does it all in one go. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to restore this course back and talk a bit about if I did want to have several different cohorts on the same course and still have access. Let's say my year ones are going into year two, but I still want the year ones to have full access to the original course. Them being on multiple courses doesn't increase the number of seats they occupy, but I still want them to be able to go back and work on some of the content maybe they missed out on, or there was some optional content that I still want them to have access to if they want to go back and work on that. How can I kind of manage different cohorts of students in my courses, and what kind of things will help me if I run it that way? What will help me to actually turn over that course at the end of the academic year? What other steps do I have to take? So I'm just going to restore this course. So go back to the archive, go to settings and unarchive. So restore the course. It'll restore all the student work. Nothing's gone. And I'm going to just get rid of my duplicate one here just to keep things simple. So when it comes to having multiple cohorts on your LT course, again, there are a few things you will want to do when you are inviting your students. So again, I appreciate some people probably already have students on their courses and they may not have done what I'm about to show, but you can do it retroactively, as I'm going to show as well. The first thing I would think about is if I've got multiple cohorts or I've got multiple years on the same LT course, I probably want to make use of sections. So in case you're not aware, students can be assigned a section as part of their invite, or you can even do it after they've been invited. And this is a text tag that you can filter by in any area of LT that involves students. So whether that's the student accounts menu here, where I'm managing their accounts, or even the grading interface, or the content release, or the availability menu in the student work. And this is pretty important for turning over your courses, because what you want to be able to do is quickly identify all of your students that are in a given cohort, so that you can clear them out when they leave, because obviously if your year twos don't continue using LT in year three, you need to remove them from LT to free up those seats. And it's hard to do if your students aren't assigned to sections, because how are you supposed to know which cohort students from, other than by looking at a name and manually comparing it to your list of the 2021 cohort and manually cross-examining it? It's better to have sections in place to easily filter out those students. Even if you don't plan on releasing content to different sections, or you don't plan on splitting them by section and grading, just being able to identify which students are from which year group or which degree program in the same course is a boon for turning over that course at the end of the year, clearing out those students that don't need access. So if you've already got students in your course that don't have a section assigned, I don't actually have any sections in this LT course, so there's not even a section field, as it were. It would normally be at the bottom here. If I need to, I can re-import the student list with the section assigned to assign my set of students a section all at once. So let's say these are my 2020-2021 students. They're just about to finish their year. I've got a little CSV file here, and all I've done, it's got all the students' same details, and all I've done is I've added the section column and I've put their intake year into the section. This could actually be anything that I want. I could make it, I could do this, doesn't matter. The text can be whatever you'd like. Just make sure it's correct for all of them. And I'm just going to download a copy of this. There we go. So I've got a section assigned here, and what I can do is simply re-import the list. This is a nice little trick for a lot of things. If you've already got students, but you need to update their details, whether you want to assign their given name and family name, or you want to retroactively assign them a section, even though they didn't have one when you add them in, you can re-import the list. And what you'll notice is that LT recognizes these students are already here. So instead of creating duplicates, it will simply update them. And you can see there that one new section will be created. And there we go, my students now have that section assigned to them as well. Just to clarify, I'm just going to quickly add one in. Just to show you, if I add in a student, I can now filter by section here. So I've got 4 students that are, sorry, it's a bit truncated on my screen here. I've got 4 students that are part of the 2021 cohort, and I've got 1 here who has no section assigned. So what I can do, let's just, I'll make it make a bit more sense. You can manually make sections in the gear menu as well if you need to. So let's say this is I want them to be that particular cohort. This student's part of the incoming year ones, so I'm going to set them as this section. Now what I can do is in the student accounts menu, I can actually filter by section. So I can go, okay, right, my year ones are going to be, they're going to be staying on here, so I can leave them here. But let's say in a year's time, these are the year 2s now, the 2020, 2021 students. They're not going to be using it in year 3. So I need to clear them out from this course. It's very easy to do. Obviously, I don't want to delete the ones that are already that need to be using it. My 2021-22 students, but I can show only my outgoing year 2s, and I can highlight them all, and I can clear them all out, all in one click. So you can kind of have multiple students, multiple different cohorts in here that you can manage as long as you use sections. But there are quite a few more pitfalls in this method. Specifically, remembering to assign the section. It can be very difficult, as I mentioned, if you add in your year 1s and you suddenly realize that you now have no idea which students are year 1 or year 2 at a glance. You're going to have to manually go through. The other thing is, if you've already got published content, it's important to note that any newly created sections do not have access to that published content. So I can illustrate this if I go into student work. This course has some published content. As we'll see, there's published modules here. If we go into here and look at the module itself, you'll notice that this little banner here says currently available to, it says all students, not sure why it says all students, it should say only some. Yeah, so if we go through, you can see that it actually says that these lessons are actually only available to some sections. If we go to availability, you'll notice that my newly created sections do not by default have access. So this is a really important workflow. If you already have published content in your course and you then subsequently create a new section, or you invite students, and as part of that, that creates a new section, those new sections will not by default have access to published content. This is something that's cropped up quite a lot. So again, this is kind of why I shy away from trying to have multiple different cohorts in the same LT course, because you need to remember to assign the section, but also it can create some availability issues if you don't realize that, oh, actually, no, once I've added the new section, I need to go into the content in student work and tell LT that, yes, these new sections should have access. By default, LT assumes they shouldn't have access, because part of what you can do with sections is assign content to some sections and not others. So by the default is LT doesn't know for sure that they should have access, so it by default doesn't grant them access. So it's a really important little pitfall that you can come across if you're using this method. For that reason, I normally advocate, as I said, try and keep a single cohort and year of students in the same LT course. That way you can duplicate the course and you can archive or delete the entire course, and you know that you're clearing out those students from that course, especially if your students are no longer using LT, you want to free up those seats. If a student, it happens to be on some random course, even though they're not meant to have access to LT anymore, but they're on some random active course, they will take up a seat in your LT room, as it were, in your LT instance. So it's far easier to be able to kind of clear access en masse via deleting or archiving the whole course. It does mean you have to kind of republish the content, but I'd say that, you know, a lot of people probably stagger the content releases anyway and don't release everything all at once. So that resets everything anyway for that, and might save you a little bit of time anyway, because you only want one module to be available. You don't want all of them to be available. Suddenly, yeah, you've got to go back in. If you've got multiple years, you might have to go in and tell LT that, yeah, only 21, 22 students should only have access to this module. So I'll only grant them access to that one, but I'll be sure not to set it for the other ones. And you've got to go through the process of setting up all the availability again for the different sections. So my advice when it comes to cycling year to year, try and, if you're not doing it already going forward, keep single cohort or a single degree program of students in a single course, one where they're all going to be cleared out or they're all going to be archived at once. You haven't got some students that need access and some that need to be cleared out, as that makes it a little more difficult to manage. So yeah, the workflow is super simple. Duplicate the course, thereby copying all the content, rename it, making it ready for your incoming students, and then archive or delete the original course. Again, it's not permanent. Archiving or deleting can be undone. None of the student work is lost. The accounts aren't permanent. The student accounts aren't permanently gone. You can restore them at any time, and it keeps your LT instance nice and clean, so it's easier to navigate. Unnecessary courses are cleared from your database. And that's all I really wanted to cover. I think we've got some questions in the Q&A. How are staff accounts handled? They'll be archived as well. So if a staff member, I'll answer it live, if a staff member only has staff access to that particular course, then they will no longer be able to log into LT, if that makes sense. In order for you to log into LT, your staff or your student account must have access to at least one active course. You'll get an error saying your account no longer has access to any instances. That's the error you get. But yeah, everything in that course is archived. Oh no, sorry, if it's archived, sorry, I'm crossing my wires there. A staff account should still be able to access it. It should only be the students that are affected with the read-only. I believe staff should still be able to access the menus. They may not be able to kind of publish or manipulate certain things, but they should still have access. It's deleted courses I'm referring to there. No, apologies. There's something in the chat. It's just that multiple staff should be using the same year course, and each staff should then use individual lessons, or should each staff have multiple courses for each year? It really depends on how you want to segment your content in LT. It is feasible for you to say, if you've got year one students and they're doing, part of their degree is to do pharmacology content and part of it is to do core physiology content, you could have two separate courses. You know, easy enough to invite the same students to two courses and have different content, keep the naming consistent. So, these are your 21, 22 courses or your 20, 21 courses. So it's kind of up to you how you segment it, how you split your content down. I guess, again, this is probably my opinion. People probably do it differently. Normally, if you look at an LT course and there's a lot of content, then you might want to think about creating a second course and migrating some of that content prior to inviting the students. If the student's already in there, keep it as it is. Because if a student logs in and comes to their homepage and they see 50 modules, that's going to put them off somewhat. If they see 3 courses with 16 modules each, that's a little bit more palatable, even though it's technically the same amount of content. It's better kind of split, a little bit more palatable for them to only see a smaller amount of content when they click on a given course. So again, it's kind of down to your personal preference whether you want to have multiple courses for your year ones because you want your multiple content, or you want to have a single course for all of your year ones with a lot of content in there. It's up to you.